Kang Ji-won is the CEO of one of South Korea's largest corporations, KJ Group, a multinational company that operates in sectors like technology, finance, and construction. At only 33 years old, Ji-won is known for his brilliance in business and his cold, ruthless demeanor. Since he was young, he was groomed to be the heir to his family's company, and because of this, he developed a rigid and calculating personality. Nothing happens in his company or personal life without his absolute control. Coming from a traditional, wealthy family, Ji-won has always been surrounded by people who wanted something from him: power, money, or influence. This made him create an emotional wall around himself, believing that no one genuinely approached him for who he truly was. As a result, he is lonely and distrustful, though he would never admit it. His only constant companion is his secretary and right-hand man, Park Soo-hyun, who has known him since their school days and is one of the few people Ji-won trusts. Moreover, Ji-won is engaged in an arranged marriage with Seo Min-jung, the heir to a large construction company, as part of an agreement between their families to strengthen their business empires. While Min-jung is beautiful, elegant, and intelligent, their relationship is purely business. There's no love between them, only a strategic alliance. For Ji-won, this is enough. He doesn't believe in true love and sees marriage as a practical matter, not an emotional one. Meanwhile, Yoon Ha-yoon's life is the complete opposite. At 24, Ha-yoon comes from humble beginnings. Her parents died when she was a teenager, leaving her responsible for her younger sister, Yoon Na-ra, and her older brother, Yoon Dong-jin, who is unemployed and struggling to find stability in life. Ha-yoon has worked part-time jobs since finishing high school, always fighting to support her family and pay off the debts her parents left behind. Despite her hardships, Ha-yoon is optimistic. Her personality is marked by kindness and the ability to find beauty in the small things in life. She believes in hard work and the goodness of people, even when the world around her seems bleak. For her, helping her family is her top priority, and she doesn't mind sacrificing her own dreams for them. Ha-eun has never had time to think about romance or personal desires, as she is always busy surviving and caring for her siblings. Her family's financial situation worsens when Ha-eun loses one of her jobs at a local cafe, forcing her to look for another source of income. Desperate for a job that pays enough, she applies for a housekeeping position in a luxurious mansion, not knowing it belongs to Kang Ji-won. The employment agency is known for placing workers in high-class homes, but Ha-eun didn't have much hope of being accepted since she had never worked in such a sophisticated environment. To her surprise, Ha-eun is called for an interview and, soon after, is hired. The housekeeper, Mrs. Jang, is a strict and stern woman, but she sees something special in Ha-eun's determination and decides to give her a chance. Kang Ji-won's mansion is vast and impressive, with luxurious gardens and a large team of staff. Ha-eun quickly realizes she is in a completely different world than what she's used to. The mansion's luxury and opulence are overwhelming, but she knows she needs the job and is determined to do her best. As she starts her new job, Ha-eun barely sees Ji-won in the first few days. He is an extremely busy man, often traveling for meetings or locked in his office, consumed by his business matters. To Ji-won, the household staff are practically invisible. They exist only to ensure everything runs smoothly without him having to worry about anything. Despite this, Ha-eun stands out for her positive attitude and dedication to her work. She quickly gets along with the rest of the staff and earns their respect, especially Mrs. Jang, who begins to trust her with more responsibilities. Ha-eun is careful, detail-oriented, and always willing to help, which makes her noticeable, even if unintentionally. Their first direct interaction happens when Ha-eun accidentally bumps into Ji-won in the mansion's hallway, causing him to drop some papers he was carrying. It's a brief but tense moment. Ji-won looks at her coldly, saying nothing. Ha-eun, frightened, quickly apologizes and bends down to pick up the papers, feeling completely out of place. To Ji-won, she's just another employee, but something about her simplicity and humility silently intrigues him, though he doesn't acknowledge it yet. This initial interaction marks the moment when their paths begin to cross. Though both of them continue their lives in completely different directions, fate has already started its course. Ha-eun keeps working hard, unaware of the impact she will have on Ji-won's life, while Jiwon, for the first time, begins to realize that not everything in his life can be controlled, especially when it comes to emotions. At this point, the class difference between them seems insurmountable. Ha-yoon sees Jiwon as someone unreachable, a powerful and distant figure, while Jiwon still views her as part of the background of his daily life, not yet understanding that, little by little, something deeper is starting to form. Both are trapped in their own realities, but the encounter between their worlds has already begun, even if neither is fully aware of it. As the days go by, Yoon Ha-eun becomes accustomed to her routine in Kang Ji-won's mansion. She starts her day early, helping prepare breakfast and cleaning the common areas. Her dedication to work and her kind way of dealing with others quickly make her popular among the staff. Mrs. Jang, the housekeeper, increasingly trusts her, seeing Ha-yoon as a hardworking and responsible young woman with a special spark that sets her apart from the rest. However, while Ha-yoon begins to feel more comfortable in her job, her interactions with Kang Ji-won remain tense. He is an impenetrable man, always serious and distant. Ji-won is used to keeping his personal life separate from that of his employees, and he rarely interacts directly with them, treating them as a functional part of his daily routine. When he walks through the mansion's hallways, the staff quickly step aside or fall silent, knowing that their boss does not like to be disturbed. Ha-eun tries to follow this unspoken rule, but her presence always seems to draw attention, even unintentionally. One morning, while Ji-won is having breakfast alone in the large dining room, Ha-eun enters to collect the dishes, as usual. She tries to be discreet, avoiding any eye contact with him. However, on this particular day, she notices that he seems exhausted, with dark circles under his eyes and an expression of fatigue that he can't hide, despite his usual coldness. Ji-won is dealing with a stressful merger between his company and a large foreign firm, which has left him under immense pressure. Ha-eun, always observant, notices this, and almost without thinking, gently asks, "You look tired. Would you like me to prepare some tea to help you relax?" Ha-eun's boldness surprises not only herself, but also Ji-won, who looks up at her for a few seconds in silence, clearly caught off guard by her casual remark. No one ever offers him anything without ulterior motives, and the idea that a maid would notice his state and offer him help is completely new to him. His first reaction is to reject her offer. "It's none of your business," he responds, his voice cold and cutting, turning his focus back to the documents on the table. Ha-eun feels the sting of his words, her eyes briefly widening in shock. She quickly bows her head and, without saying another word, gathers the dishes and leaves the room, feeling foolish for speaking up. To her, Ji-won is a distant, almost untouchable figure, and now he seems even more impossible to approach. Despite his harsh reply, something about the encounter bothers Ji-won. He's not used to receiving this kind of genuine attention. For a brief moment, he realizes that Ha-eun's concern seemed sincere, with nothing to gain from it. This unsettles him, but he quickly suppresses the feeling, turning his focus back to work. In the following days, the interactions between Ha-eun and Ji-won remain strained. She does her best to avoid crossing paths with him, fearing more harsh responses, and focuses on her duties. However, since she works directly in the mansion, it's inevitable that they occasionally cross paths. Ha-eun tries to make herself invisible, but Ji-won, without realizing it, starts observing her from afar. He doesn't admit it, even to himself, but her presence in the mansion somehow unsettles and intrigues him at the same time. Meanwhile, Seo Min-jung, Ji-won's fiancé, starts visiting the mansion more often, as their arranged marriage approaches. Min-jung is an elegant and sophisticated woman, accustomed to the world of the rich and powerful. She's aware that her marriage to Ji-won is an agreement between their families, but that doesn't stop her from wanting to control every aspect of his life. Min-jung doesn't love Ji-won, but she sees him as a symbol of power and status that she wants to secure. Since her first visit to the mansion after Ha-eun's arrival, Min-jung quickly notices the new maid. Something about Ha-eun's humility and simple demeanor irritates her, especially when she notices that Ji-won, even unintentionally, occasionally glances curiously in her direction. Min-jung is perceptive, and a seed of jealousy begins to grow in her heart, even though, rationally, She knows that Jiwon would never be interested in someone so far below his social class. During one of her visits, while Jiwon is busy in his office, Min Jung decides to confront Ha-eun, though she disguises it as a friendly conversation. She finds Ha-eun in the garden, watering the plants, and approaches with a fake smile. "So, you're the new maid," Min Jung says, looking Ha-eun up and down with a condescending tone. "It seems you're doing a good job. It must be hard, right? Working for someone like Jiwon?" Ha-eun, always nervous in the presence of her employers, smiles politely and replies, "Yes, ma'am. I'm doing my best. Mrs. Jang has helped me a lot." "Oh, of course," Min Jung says with a dry laugh. "But you know, don't you? People like us and people like you, we live in different worlds. I hope you understand that. Ji-won is a very busy man and doesn't have time for distractions. The message is clear. Min Jung, even without making an explicit threat, wants Ha-eun to know that she sees her as a potential threat and will not tolerate any closeness between her and Ji-won. Ha-eun, uncomfortable, keeps her humble posture and nods. "I understand, ma'am. I'm just here to work." Min Jung gives a cold smile, satisfied with the answer. She turns to leave, but not before casting one last warning glance at Ha-eun. From that moment on, the tension between them silently grows, even though Ha-eun does everything she can to avoid any problems. Meanwhile, Ji-won begins to realize that his thoughts are becoming increasingly scattered. Despite his mind always being focused on business, he finds himself thinking about Ha-eun at inopportune moments. Something about the way she behaves, so different from the people around him, deeply intrigues him. He tries to push these thoughts away, reminding himself that she is just a maid, someone he should never get involved with. However, the more he tries to ignore her, the more his curiosity grows. The growing tension between the two does not go unnoticed by the other staff members in the mansion. Although no one speaks openly, rumors begin circulating among the team about Ji-won's behavior toward Ha-eun, and some start to wonder if this might cause problems for her. Ha-eun tries to keep her head down and continue her work, but the judgmental looks from the other employees make her increasingly anxious. At the same time, Seo Min Jung's pressure mounts. She starts visiting the mansion more frequently, always keeping a close eye on any interactions between Ji-won and Ha-eun. She knows she can't confront Ji-won directly, as he is extremely powerful and doesn't tolerate disrespect, but she is determined to keep Ha-eun in her place. Min Jung begins to plan ways to get rid of the young maid before she becomes a real threat to her relationship and her plans for marriage. The tension between growing love and increasingly difficult obstacles is about to reach a breaking point, with Ji-won and Ha-eun struggling to understand their feelings, while Min Jung schemes in the shadows, determined to protect her territory. As the days go by, Kang Ji-won begins to realize that his thoughts are becoming more scattered. Work, which has always been his absolute priority, no longer seems to be the only thing commanding his attention. Ha-eun, with her discreet yet constant presence, invades his thoughts with alarming frequency. He doesn't fully understand why he is so fascinated by someone so simple, so far outside his world, but he can't help it. Every time he sees her walking through the mansion's hallways or tending to the garden, he feels an inexplicable unease that prevents him from ignoring her. This internal confusion manifests in his treatment of her. Ji-won tries to maintain his distance and professionalism, but the coldness he imposes only masks the growing emotional turmoil he feels whenever he sees her. One morning, as he's leaving for work, he sees Ha-eun in the garden. The sunlight illuminates her face, and for a brief moment, time seems to stop for Ji-won. She is so different from everyone else around him, not just physically, but in essence. Her humility and natural kindness stand in stark contrast to the calculated, insincere world he's used to. Meanwhile, Ha-eun is just as confused and scared. She knows that any kind of involvement with Ji-won is impossible. He is her boss, engaged to Seo Min Jung, and belongs to a world she could never be part of. Ha-eun tries to fight these feelings, reminding herself that she is there only to work and that she must focus on her responsibilities, especially to her family, who rely on her salary. However, their encounters start to happen more frequently, whether by chance or fate. One afternoon, Ha-eun is assigned to clean Ji-won's office. a task that always makes her nervous because it's his personal space. When she enters, she thinks he's not there. But to her surprise, Jiwon is sitting at his desk in a video conference meeting with international executives. He signals for her to enter and continue her work, and Ha-eun, embarrassed, tries to be as quiet as possible. As she cleans, she overhears fragments of the business conversation in English, a language she doesn't fully understand but knows enough to recognize it's something of great importance. Jiwon, however, seems uncomfortable and stressed by the discussion, which clearly isn't going as he'd hoped. When the meeting ends, he exhales heavily, running his hands through his hair in frustration. Without thinking, Ha-eun quietly approaches with a cup of tea she had prepared, placing it on his desk. "I made some tea for you. It looks like you need it," she says in a soft voice, trying not to intrude. Jiwon looks at her, surprised by her initiative. He hesitates for a moment, but instead of rejecting her offer as he had before, he takes the cup, observing it for a moment before taking a small sip. To his own surprise, the tea actually calms him a bit. Ha-eun, feeling shy, moves away and continues cleaning the office. But in that small gesture, something shifts between them. Jiwon, despite his pride, begins to see Ha-eun as a sort of refuge, a calming presence amid the chaos of his corporate life. On the other hand, Seo Min-jung begins to notice the changes in Jiwon's behavior. Always so focused on work, he now seems more distracted, more distant, and her visits to the mansion become more sporadic. She doesn't take long to suspect that Ha-eun, the new maid, might be the cause of this change. Min-jung is proud and determined, and she's not willing to let a mere servant interfere with her plans to marry Jiwon and secure her position as part of one of the most influential families in Korea. During one of her visits to the mansion, Min-jung makes sure to follow Ha-eun around, watching her every move. While Ha-eun cleans the living room, Min-jung approaches, as if wanting to confront her directly, but instead chooses a more subtle and cruel approach. She starts speaking to Ha-eun in a condescending tone, pretending to be curious about her life. "So, Ha-eun," Min-jung begins with a fake smile on her face. "How is it working here? It must be interesting to see what goes on in the home of such a powerful man like Jiwon, don't you think?" Ha-eun, always polite and trying to remain calm, responds humbly. "Yes, ma'am. I'm doing my best. Mrs. Jang has been helping me a lot." Min-jung lets out a short but malicious laugh. "Helping? Well, I hope you understand that there are certain places you shouldn't meddle in. Certain people are out of your reach. You shouldn't have any illusions about what can or cannot happen here." The threat is clear. Min-jung, even without explicitly saying it, makes it clear that she sees Ha-eun as a threat and isn't willing to tolerate any sort of closeness between her and Jiwon. Ha-eun, her heart racing, only lowers her head and mutters an apology, trying to control her discomfort. "Let me help you," he says, grabbing some of the towels from her hands. Ha-eun, shocked by his gesture, tries to protest, but Jiwon insists, saying it's no big deal. This small interaction, though simple, sparks a deeper connection between the two, but also reinforces the walls separating them. Ha-eun becomes even more confused, trying to understand why the most powerful man she has ever met is acting so kindly toward her, while Jiwon struggles with his own feelings, knowing that it is completely inappropriate. The growing tension between the two doesn't go unnoticed by the other employees in the mansion. Although no one speaks openly, rumors circulate among the staff about Jiwon's behavior toward Ha-eun, and some begin to wonder if this might cause problems for her. Ha-eun tries to keep her head down and continue with her work, but the judgmental glances from the other employees make her increasingly nervous. Meanwhile, the pressure from Seo Min-jung grows. She starts visiting the mansion more frequently, always keeping a close watch on any interaction between Jiwon and Ha-eun. She knows she can't confront Jiwon directly, as he is extremely powerful and doesn't tolerate disrespect, but she is determined to keep Ha-eun in her place. Min-jung begins plotting ways to remove the young maid before she becomes a real threat to her relationship and her marriage plans. The growing tension between their developing love and the increasingly difficult obstacles is about to reach a boiling point, with Jiwon and Ha-eun struggling to understand their feelings while Min-jung schemes in the shadows, determined to protect her territory. The tension between Kang Ji-won and Yoon Ha-eun continues to grow, reaching a point where neither can deny the intensity of their attraction any longer. Ji-won, always composed and rational, now finds himself unable to maintain the coldness that has always defined him. Every time he sees Ha-eun around the mansion, his heart races, and he begins to get frustrated with his own behavior, unable to understand how a mere housemaid has managed to invade his thoughts and emotions in such a way. On the other hand, Ha-eun is equally confused and scared. She knows that any form of involvement with Ji-won is impossible. He is her employer, engaged to Seo Min-jung, and belongs to a world she could never enter. Ha-eun tries to fight these feelings, reminding herself that she is there only to work and that she must focus on her responsibilities, especially to her family, who rely on her income. However, their encounters become more frequent, and each time, their self-control weakens. The turning point comes on a rainy night when Ji-won arrives at the mansion much later than usual, after a long and frustrating business meeting. He is emotionally drained, and as he enters the house, he sees Ha-eun finishing cleaning the entrance hall. She, as always, tries to remain unnoticed, but upon seeing him so worn out, something in her heart compels her to ask, "Are you okay, sir?" Ji-won stops, surprised by the question. For a moment, all his exhaustion surfaces, and he can no longer maintain his mask of invulnerability. Without thinking much, he replies, "No, I'm not." This admission catches Ha-eun off guard, and she hesitates, unsure of what to say. Ji-won, for his part, stands still for a few moments, staring at the floor as if he's fighting an internal battle. The silence between them becomes almost palpable, filled with a tension they both feel but can't put into words. Suddenly, Ji-won takes a step toward Ha-eun, and before he can stop himself, his hand gently touches her arm. Ha-eun is startled, her eyes wide as she feels his touch for the first time. Ji-won takes a deep breath, clearly struggling with his emotions, and finally breaks the silence. "Why are you always around?" His voice, usually controlled, is now charged with emotion, as if he's been asking himself this question for a long time. "Why can't I stop thinking about you?" Ha-eun freezes. What she feared for weeks is now happening before her eyes. Ji-won, the untouchable and distant CEO, is confessing feelings she never imagined were possible. She steps back, unsure of what to say or how to react. Her heart races, but her mind is in panic. "This is a mistake," she whispers, shaking her head. This can't happen." Ji-won takes another step closer, clearly unwilling to let her back away so easily. His gaze, normally cold and detached, is now filled with an intensity Ha-eun has never seen before. "Why not?" he asks, his voice low and full of repressed emotion. "Why is it a mistake? I've never felt like this before, Ha-eun, and no matter how hard I try, I can't stop caring about you." His words hit Ha-eun like a tidal wave. Had she wanted to hear this? Perhaps in her deepest dreams, but reality is much more complex and painful. The class differences, Ji-won's engagement, the employer-employee relationship. All of these make any chance of a relationship impossible. She feels her eyes fill with tears as she responds, "Because you're my boss." Her voice trembles and she takes another step back, trying to control her emotions. "And you're engaged. I can't be part of this." Ha-eun is on the verge of tears, but she holds herself together. She knows that any involvement with Ji-won would not only ruin her career, but also destroy her dignity. She remembers Min-jung, the veiled threat she made, and how much her own family depends on her. Ha-eun cannot afford to be selfish, even if her heart is fighting against reason. Ji-won, however, cannot fully understand the pain Ha-eun is feeling. He has never had to face such barriers in his life. To him, the world has always bent to his will, except now, in front of this woman who somehow is the one thing he cannot control. His frustration grows, and he steps closer again, almost pressing his face to hers. "I don't care about rules, Ha-eun," Ji-won says, his voice now softer, almost pleading. All I know is that I don't want to lose you. His words, though sincere, only leave Ha-eun more troubled. She knows that if she gives in to these feelings, everything around her could collapse. Ji-won has everything to lose: his reputation, his engagement, his position. And she has even more. Her life, her family, her job, all depend on keeping a clear boundary between her and him. Ha-eun feels tears rolling down her face, and before Ji-won can say anything else, she steps back again. This can't happen. Ha-eun murmurs, her voice almost breaking. You belong to another world, a world I will never be part of. Without waiting for a response, Ha-eun quickly leaves, practically running to her quarters, leaving Ji-won alone in the hall, frustrated and confused. He still feels the lingering sensation on his hand where he touched her arm, as if the brief contact between them had left a mark on his skin and in his mind. He watches her disappear down the corridor, unable to follow, trapped in his own thoughts. From that moment on, Ji-won begins to question everything he has always believed. He realizes that his engagement to Seo Min-jung means nothing to him, that it's just an empty formality, and that Ha-eun, a humble young woman far from his reality, is the only person who has ever stirred true feelings in him. But how to deal with that? In the days that follow, Ha-eun tries her best to avoid Ji-won. She knows she must maintain both physical and emotional distance, but this becomes almost impossible with Min-jung's frequent visits to the mansion. Ji-won's fiancé is more watchful than ever, sensing the growing distance between her and Ji-won and the increasing tension between him and Ha-eun. During one visit, Min-jung finally confronts Ha-eun more directly. She finds her in the hallway and grabs her arm, pulling her into an empty room. Her eyes are full of anger and determination. I don't know what you think you're doing, but let me be clear, Min-jung says, her voice low and threatening. Ji-won is mine. Our marriage is already decided, and you are nothing but a temporary distraction. Don't you dare think you can interfere with what's destined. Ha-eun tries to pull away, but Min-jung's grip and her words leave her frozen. Even so, she can't stop the tears from rolling down her face, knowing deep down that Min-jung is right. Ji-won's world and hers could never mix. After the confrontation, Ha-eun makes a painful decision. She knows she can no longer work at the mansion. Her feelings for Ji-won have gone too far, and Min-jung's constant presence only makes everything worse. Ha-eun decides that it's best for everyone if she quits her job and walks away from that world for good, even if it means sacrificing her only source of income. Ha-eun informs Mrs. Jang of her decision, who, although surprised, respects her choice. Ha-eun packs her things, and before she can change her mind, she's ready to leave the mansion forever, determined to forget Ji-won and move on with her life. The next morning, Yoon Ha-eun prepares to leave the mansion. Her bags are packed, and her heart is heavy with the decision she has made. She knows she is doing the right thing, even though it deeply hurts her. Her time in the mansion has made her realize just how different her world is from Kang Ji-won's, and staying there would risk her dignity and her family's stability. She can't let her feelings jeopardize everything she has worked so hard to build. As she walks through the quiet hallways, Ha-eun encounters Mrs. Jang, who greets her with a sad yet understanding look. The housekeeper, who has always had a sharp instinct for sensing what's going on with her staff, knew something was wrong from the moment Ha-eun announced her departure. Although Mrs. Jang didn't question Ha-eun's decision directly, she had sensed the growing tension between Ha-eun and Ji-won, and suspected it had influenced her choice. Ha-eun, you're an excellent worker. I'm sure you'll find a good place to work, but I hope you know what you're doing, Mrs. Jang says, her tone gentle but firm. Ha-eun, struggling to keep her emotions in check, only smiles and thanks her for the opportunity to work there. She knows Mrs. Jang is being careful with her words, but deep down, Ha-eun feels that the housekeeper understands the true reason for her leaving. They say their goodbyes in silence, and Ha-eun heads toward the mansion's entrance, hoping never to face the emotional turmoil surrounding her relationship with Ji-won again. As Ha-eun leaves the property, Ji-won is in his office at the company, buried in a sea of papers and reports. Yet no matter how hard he tries to focus on business, his mind constantly drifts back to Ha-eun. He's fully aware of the growing tension between them and how his feelings for her have been affecting his behavior. Jiwon feels frustrated and confused, unsure how to deal with something he never planned for. Love. His assistant Park Soo-hyun notices his boss's unusual mood. Having known Jiwon for years, he knows not to interfere unless asked. However, that morning, Soo-hyun receives an urgent message from the mansion, informing him that Ha-eun has decided to quit her job. He hesitates before delivering the news to Jiwon, knowing it might disturb him even more. But he also knows he can't keep this information from him. When Jiwon hears that Ha-eun is leaving, a shock runs through him. His already disordered thoughts now turn to pure chaos. He had never imagined that she would actually leave him. Something inside him stirs, and he immediately stands up, his heart pounding at the thought that if he doesn't act now, he might lose her forever. "Cancel my schedule for today," he says to Soo-hyun abruptly, grabbing his coat. Soo-hyun, stunned, just nods, watching as Jiwon rushes out of the office in an unusually frantic state. Jiwon drives at high speed back to the mansion, his heart heavy with uncertainty. He had never allowed himself to chase after anyone, never let personal feelings interfere with his life. But now, something inside him is driving him not to let Ha-eun leave. He thinks of all the times he tried to suppress his feelings for her, all the barriers he tried to build between them, and realizes he can't live like that anymore. When he arrives at the mansion, Jiwon rushes to the entrance, and to his relief, he sees Ha-eun at the gate with her suitcase, about to call a taxi. She seems lost in thought, and Jiwon realizes just how vulnerable she looks in that moment. Without thinking, he walks toward her, his heart racing. Ha-eun, hearing footsteps, turns and freezes when she sees Jiwon. She hadn't expected him to come after her. "Ha-eun," Jiwon begins, breathing heavily as he tries to gather his thoughts. He's not used to expressing his feelings, but in this moment, there's no room for pride or rationality. "Please don't go." Ha-eun looks at him, surprised and confused. She wanted to believe he cared, but she knows things can't be that simple. Her voice trembles as she replies, I have to go, Mr. Kang. This isn't my place. I've already made my decision." Jiwon feels the desperation rising. He's losing the one person who made him feel something real for the first time in a long time, and he doesn't know how to handle it. "Why isn't it your place?" Jiwon asks, his voice filled with emotion. "Who said you don't belong here?" I need you here, Ha-eun. I don't know how or why, but you've changed everything. And I can't just let you leave." Ha-eun feels her heart tighten at his words, but her mind is still dominated by fear and reason. "You know this is impossible," she responds, tears filling her eyes. "We're from different worlds. You're engaged. I'm just a maid. What we have can't happen. I can't stay here knowing that we can never be anything more than boss and employee." Jiwon feels the impact of Ha-eun's words, but he refuses to accept it. He knows that, despite all the circumstances, his feelings for her are real and deep. And in that moment, he realizes he has to make a radical decision, one that will change his life and hers forever. "I'm going to break off the engagement with Min-jung," Jiwon declares, his voice firm and determined. Ha-eun looks at him, stunned. She knows Jiwon's engagement to Seo Min-jung is an alliance between two powerful families, something much bigger than just feelings. She shakes her head, unable to believe he would do something so drastic. "No, you can't do that. Not because of me," she insists, her voice breaking. "I'm doing this for us." Jiwon replies, stepping closer to her. "Min-jung and I never had anything real. Our engagement is a sham, a business arrangement. But with you, it's different. For the first time, I feel like I can be myself, and I'm not going to let this opportunity slip away." Ha-eun is in shock. She had always known that Jiwon was determined, but she never expected him to challenge his own family and his position for her. Yet, the fear still dominates her. "What about your family? Your company?" Ha-eun asks, still struggling with her feelings. "Are you really willing to risk everything for someone like me?" I'm nobody." Jiwon takes her hands firmly, looking deeply into her eyes. You're someone to me, he says with all the sincerity he can muster. I don't care what others think. For the first time, I'm not going to let conventions or expectations control me. Ha-eun, I just need to know if you feel the same way about me. Because if you do, we can face all of this together. Jiwon's words break the last of Ha-eun's resistance. She had always known, deep down, that her feelings for him were real, but she never allowed herself to believe they could have a future. Now, faced with Jiwon's vulnerability and his determination to fight for her, Ha-eun feels that she can no longer deny what she feels. With tears in her eyes, she finally admits, I feel the same, Jiwon. The relief Jiwon feels hearing those words is immense. He pulls Ha-eun into a tight embrace, as if he has finally found something he never knew he needed. Ha-eun, resting her head against his chest, feels the strength of the moment, knowing that their lives will never be the same again. Despite the momentary relief and happiness, they both know the road ahead will be difficult. There are still many barriers to overcome. The breakup with Min-jung, the consequences for Jiwon's company and family, and the world's reaction to their relationship. But in that moment, all of that seems secondary. With the decision made, Jiwon and Ha-eun prepare to face the consequences together, knowing that, no matter what comes next, what they have is real and worth fighting for. After the emotional confrontation between Kang Ji-won and Yoon Ha-eun, both know they are about to face a storm. The decisions they made, especially Ji-won's to break off his engagement with Seo Min-jung, will not be easy to execute. However, in the moment they confess their feelings, they realize that despite all the challenges, they must fight for what they feel for each other. The next day, Ji-won calls a meeting with his parents and Min-jung's family. He knows that breaking off an arranged engagement between two powerful families, whose union would bring political and business advantages, will be seen as an act of rebellion with serious repercussions. Even so, he is determined. For the first time in his life, Ji-won feels he is making a genuine decision, based on something real and not on social conventions or business strategies. The meeting takes place in the luxurious dining room of the Kang family home. Ji-won's parents, Kang Soo-chan and his wife, are rigid, traditional people who have always put the family's success above everything else. When Ji-won finally reveals his intention to cancel the wedding, they are shocked. Seo Min-jung and her mother, also present, can't hide their indignation. Have you lost your mind? Ji-won's father exclaims, his voice booming across the room. This marriage is crucial for our family. What are you doing, Ji-won? Are you really willing to throw everything away for a whim? Min-jung, for her part, tries to keep a composed mask, but her eyes betray the anger she feels. For her, this isn't just a personal betrayal, but also a threat to her public image and her family's ambitions. What's going on here? Min-jung asks, trying to stay calm. Who is this woman that's making you act like this? A mere maid? This is an insult to everything our families have built. Ji-won remains calm, though his voice is serious and controlled. It's not about whims or business. He replies, I can't marry someone I don't have feelings for. It's not fair to you, Min-jung, and it's not fair to me. I've always been honest about the fact that our engagement was just an arrangement. I don't want to live a lie. The tension in the air is palpable. Ji-won's parents exchange glances, bewildered by their son's determination. Kang Soo-chan, the patriarch, stands up, visibly upset. Are you willing to sacrifice our family's reputation for a woman who doesn't belong to our world? He asks coldly. She's a maid, Ji-won. A girl with no status, no resources. Are you prepared to face the consequences? Ji-won looks his father straight in the eye, his expression firm and resolute. Yes, I am, Ji-won says, his voice steady. For the first time, I'm going to do something I truly want. I can't keep living the life you've planned for me. I can't marry Min-jung just because it's what's expected of me. I'll face the consequences. Min-jung, realizing that Ji-won is truly determined, finally loses her patience. Her voice, once controlled, now reveals her fury. You're going to regret this, Ji-won. You're throwing away a golden opportunity. And for who? For a woman who will never be accepted in our world? Her eyes blaze with anger as she abruptly stands up. This won't end well for either of you. With those words, Min Jung storms out of the room, leaving a heavy silence behind. Her mother follows her, furious about the outcome. The meeting ends in tension, but Ji-won feels a weight lifted from his shoulders. He has finally faced what he needed to, though he knows the consequences are still to come. Meanwhile, Ha-eun, unaware of what is happening, tries to carry on with her life. Since deciding to stay after Ji-won's confession, she has lived with the uncertainty of what's to come. She still feels out of place in the luxurious and distant world Ji-won inhabits, but now she knows her feelings are reciprocated. However, guilt and fear still haunt her, especially because she believes her actions could destroy Ji-won's future and his family's reputation. That night, Ji-won goes to the house where Ha-eun lives with her siblings. He finds her sitting outside, deep in thought, reflecting on everything that has happened in the past few days. When Ji-won arrives, Ha-eun stands up, surprised. "What happened?" Ha-eun asks, clearly nervous. "Did you speak to your family?" Ji-won, with a calm smile, nods. "I did. And I broke off the engagement. There are no more barriers between us now." Ha-eun stands in silence for a moment, processing what he said. Although part of her feels relieved, the other part is filled with fear of the consequences. "But what about your family, your company?" Ha-eun asks, still scared. "Min Jung won't let this go easily, Ji-won. I don't want to be the cause of trouble for you." Ji-won approaches her, taking her hands gently. "I've already made my decision, Ha-eun. I know there will be difficulties, but I'm ready to face them with you. For the first time, I'm fighting for something that really matters to me. And I'm not going to turn back." Ji-won's words warm Ha-eun's heart, but she still hesitates. "I don't want you to sacrifice everything because of me," she murmurs. "I'm not worthy of this. I'm not from your world." Ji-won shakes his head. "It's not about worth or different worlds. It's about what I feel. And what I feel for you is stronger than any social convention or expectation. Please trust me." Finally, Ha-eun feels like she can breathe. The barriers she had feared so much seem to be falling, one by one. For the first time, she allows herself to hope and love fully. She smiles at Ji-won, her eyes filled with emotion. "I trust you," she whispers. And in that moment, it feels like the world around them fades away. In the days that follow, Ji-won keeps his promise and deals with the repercussions of his decision. As expected, the news of his broken engagement with Min Jung causes a scandal in the media, especially because he is publicly involved with a woman of humble origins. The tabloids and business magazines speculate about the impact on KJ Group's reputation, and investors begin to question his personal and professional decisions. However, Ji-won remains firm. He is determined not to let external pressures affect his relationship with Ha-eun. Although he initially faces resistance from some members of the company's board, he manages to demonstrate that his personal choices do not interfere with his ability to lead the corporation. Min Jung, for her part, tries to sabotage Ji-won and Ha-eun in various ways, using her influence in the media and business circles to tarnish their image. However, Ji-won confronts all these attempts calmly and resolutely, making it clear that he will not go back on his decision. In a moment of great relief, Ji-won also manages to speak with his parents, and although they are still disappointed, they begin to accept that their son is living according to his own terms. Gradually, the resistance from his family fades, and they realize that perhaps Ji-won's happiness is more important than a business arrangement. Over time, Ji-won and Ha-eun find a new balance. They face the challenges together, but the love they have built is stronger than any obstacle. Ha-eun, now more confident and secure in herself, learns to navigate Ji-won's world without losing her humble and caring essence. Ji-won, on the other hand, learns to value what truly matters in life: genuine love and happiness alongside someone who accepts him for who he is, not for his status or wealth. In the end, they discover that, despite class differences and social expectations, true love can overcome any barrier. Jiwon and Haeun's story becomes a testament to the idea that when two people are willing to fight for what they feel, it doesn't matter where they come from. What matters is what they are willing to build together. The drama ends with the scene of Jiwon and Haeun walking hand in hand through a park at sunset. Their lives are still full of challenges, but now they face the future with courage and, most importantly, together. What did you think of this drama? Don't forget to comment below. We really want to know your opinion. If you liked the video, leave a like to support the channel, and of course, if you're not yet subscribed, subscribe now and activate the bell so you don't miss any of our next dramas full of romance, drama, and incredible twists.